CL 650 presents your source for leading-edge news and information on today's hottest products and services. This is Experts on Call.
Welcome to Key Pacific Strata Life on Experts on Call on CIL 650. I'm Tony Giovento, your host, and in the studio with us tonight we have Albert Atfield, who is the CanStar project manager who deals with emergency restorations, project management, every bit that happens after a disaster. Albert, it's just never ends, does it?
More or less, yeah.
And we're fortunate to have Sean Lang, who is the senior consultant with Specifex Roofing Specialists. And Sean, you're probably pretty busy now, also dealing with disasters after
the weather
fact.
changes, and all of a sudden our phone rings. That's
Hot
right.
summer, nobody's that busy, not concerned because there's no rain, no water leaking.
It's funny, everybody seems to forget they have a roof when the weather's good. And then as soon as the weather changes, they remember, whether they're reminded by a leak or by something blowing off and hitting their car. But they're reminded. And then we get the phone calls.
It's kind of like snow tires, right? Nobody puts the snow tires on until the first snowfall, and then
your car goes sideways
and then everybody's in a bit of a terror mode. We've had some interesting times in the past week with the Lower Mainland especially, but also in the interior. Been fires, issues within communities with smoke damage, with fire damage, emergency situations across the province. And a lot of the problems that we deal with, some of it has to deal with preparation issues, some of it has to do with planning, some has to deal with age of buildings, but unfortunately in the last storm, a lot of the damages that occurred were just simply unforeseen, unpredictable. It was a freak storm that everybody had dealt with. Albert, you know, we're dealing with a storm. We have a sudden windstorm. We're dealing with a number of buildings that are damaged. What are the kind of damages that you guys have been dealing with and identifying?
Well, the damages vary. You've got roof impacts from trees. You're going to find that you're going to have a lot of areas where the power was out for extended periods of time, so sump pumps aren't operational, so you're going to have basements backing up with water and whatnot. So it's going to be all across the map, just all different kinds of things, as you can well imagine with a storm like what we had.
So roofs, Sean, we get into the storm damage. We obviously had a lot of trees come down on a lot of buildings, and we certainly had a lot of strata buildings that were damaged.
Trees are definitely the most obvious issue that can happen when there's a windstorm, but there's a lot of things that can happen aside from just the trees. The leaves themselves, which are coming off of all the trees, and in this case the storm happened when there was a lot of leaves still on the trees, so a lot of leaves were blowing around, will plug drains quite quickly actually. So you're going to run the risk of a lot of flat roofs actually accumulating a lot of water and weight load on those roofs as a result of this. The high winds can also cause damage to older shingle roof systems that may have weak adhesion strips on the back side, or poor performing shingles where they're slightly weaker than they were, and the wind will now pick them up and take them off the roof. So it's very prudent for any homeowner or condo strata people to make sure that they get their roofs checked over after a wind event, because there could be numerous different things that have happened. Chimney pipe caps can blow off and they can roll around on a roof, and they could effectively plug a drain as well. Or if it's a heavy enough lid off of an air conditioning unit, it could fly off if it wasn't secured properly and cause damage to a membrane system. These are things you may not notice until a while later, when a leak has actually occurred, caused damage, and the water's infiltrated the building. And a lot of times the water isn't always going to come into the building immediately. It could be a delayed reaction where it sort of soaks through an insulation layer, takes its time getting through the structure of the building, causing damage along the way until maybe even months later it starts to show through your ceiling. So after every large wind event, it's definitely a good idea to have your roof system checked over, whether it's sloped or flat.
You know, it's interesting with multifamily buildings. I think every building needs to look at the different type of building that they are and come up with a different checklist. So if we're townhouses and everybody has sloped roofs, what are the impacts going to be? What are the potential problems? And look at the surrounding areas of trees. Look at the the conditions. Look at the frequency of having gutters cleaned, and the type of systems that take water away from buildings. Well, if you're a flat roof, what kind of preparation are you making? Right? Like, do you have somebody during a major storm event who's going to be checking drains? Preventing, the roof is designed that if a drain plugs, it can obviously for a short period of time hold the capacity of water, and there's overflow scuppers that we hope are not blocked as well.
Yeah,
right.
That's a very good point, because if a strata council, typically a strata council will have a roofing committee sometimes only in the case where they're planning to have the roof dealt with. But they should really have some people on the Strata Council that are actually appointed to dealing with the roof and monitoring the roof, and have people designated to sort of watch the complex or the building, whatever it is. And if it is an individual unit complex, you know, maybe there should be some kind of a letter that goes out in the beginning of the fall or late summer, let's say, warning people, let's start looking at our roofs, people, because everybody is then sort of responsible for their own individual unit. It's easier for them to walk around and look at things. And a lot of it you can see from the ground, so there's no risk to the homeowner. But on a large one roof strata building, where you can't see everything, they really need to appoint somebody or hire a properly trained roofing professional to come out and walk the roof system and put together a list of things that need to be fixed, or report on what's going on.
Well, and a small flashing failure can cause tens of thousands of dollars of damage
certainly.
if you ignore it, right?
Certainly.
And it can be exacerbated during a windstorm, ice storm, snowstorm. We still have across the province a problem with ice dams, especially townhouse complexes with adjoining carports and roofs that are uninsulated, with adjoining heat spaces. You know, we see chronic issues like that in outlying problems. Look at Whistler, look at the mountainside resorts where we have a lot of issues with condos as well.
Well, one of the things we see quite often is roofing contractors will go in and tear off a roof system to install a new one without dealing with the flashings at the wall. So they leave those flashings in place to try and save the owner's money and make the job go quicker. And if you don't take those flashings out, you're not carrying the underlayment up the wall properly and interfacing it with the wall sheathing system. So then if you have heavy wind-driven rains, which will actually blow water uphill, it'll blow water up to where they've terminated their underlayment, which is now a void. And it can now get into the building because they never interfaced everything properly. So sometimes saving the money and getting a job done cheaply could have an effect in a wind event like that.
So Albert, one of the buildings that had a fair amount of damage had two problems. First, they had the leaves plug the rooftop, flat top roof. The leaves plugged the gutters. The roof hadn't been cleaned during the summertime. Then they had a roof, a tree that had been severed penetrated the roof. And then they had a great amount of water, of course, come into the penthouse units and down as far as the second floor in the building. It starts out as clean water, but it doesn't end up to be clean water if you don't deal with it right away, does it?
Well, there's a timing factor with this, so you want to try and accomplish at least the cleanup portion within 24 to 48 hours, ideally. Now, that may not be attainable in a large event where there's multiple issues going on throughout the city. So one of the first things you want to do is try and extract whatever standing water there is and apply drying procedure immediately. If you're able to, that will help to control the grade of the water. Now, we also have to be honest with ourselves and consider where the water's coming from, and that may not even be applicable at that point in time. We may have to go straight into just a mitigation mode and then straight into full removal.
Well, and one of the problems that came up as a result of this storm was that we had water coming into buildings with the rain that followed. That was a serious problem, and there was no ability of extraction because of no electricity.
Right, right.
Sorry, I have my own storm going on in my throat. Dwayne, can we just do a little cut?
Yeah, get rid of it.
Oh, yeah. Boy, you can't get good paid help, eh? Yeah, it just bails on us. All right, no more Tony. It's our show now. It's been a crazy 2 weeks, to say the least.
Yeah.
I think for everybody, really. But that's what we're in business for, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we can't complain about it.
It's almost good timing for it to have happened at that.
Well, yeah, you were saying you weren't overly busy, so yeah, it kind of sparks your season, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, we just, like I said earlier, as soon as people see rain coming down, they go, oh yeah, right, we were supposed to do something with that, and then we get the phone calls. So
yeah,
we were waiting. We were waiting for the rain.
Yeah, I'm sure of it.
Oh, look at you! What's in the cup?
Just trying to make sure that we don't get the same cough.
Oh, I know.
Thank you, sir. Let's let him say a few words and get that frog out of his throat.
Me, mo. Yeah, it's remnants of a very big cohiba on the weekend. So the 1-a-year test, right? So, and then you remember all the reasons why you don't smoke cigars. Okay, where did we finish off? We were talking about the water in the building.
Water in the building.
So we'll just kind of pick up there, and you can just splice it, or yeah, we're not going to redo the whole thing. Thanks. So how much time are we into it? About 7 minutes. Okay. Come on. Okay. So I'll just follow up with the water.
You start where you want.
The longer it stays.
I'll come up with some line.
Okay. We're good. Okay. So Albert, the water that gets into the building, Strata doesn't have power to clean it up. We're on a backup. There's no emergency call service. What are the things they can do to mitigate this?
In all honesty, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do to mitigate it, because from a personal standpoint, I have to look at it for a safety aspect. So, you could try buckets and stuff like that for the short term, but the reality is you're in a dark environment. You're not really sure maybe where you are. So I always lean on safety becoming the first thing to worry about for each individual person. In all respects, you probably want to find a place of refuge for the period of time till we can get some power and kind of see where things are, or at least have a visual. You can do the flashlight inspections and whatnot, but they are a little bit sometimes wasteful, because you don't really accomplish much, because there's no action plan that can be taken without any power ability.
Other than protecting a few personal items,
that's
the
about
most important
it.
thing is your personal safety.
Yeah, I agree, Tony.
Right.
And that's it. That and your own self, and then hopefully the damage is minimal and we can deal with it in a quick, expedited manner.
So we have a tree that's come through the top of a roof, and obviously the extraction of the tree is going to be the first issue. And there's still a backup on that. I think we're almost cleaned up now with most of the buildings. I've noticed 1 or 2 buildings around still tree crews on the buildings removing trees that were quite substantial. At this point, roof repairs obviously are imminent, but it's now damage to roof deck, attic, insulation, structure. It's not just a matter of patching a hole in a roof anymore, is it?
No, and when you have an older roof system, now you have to look at, do I just patch that area, or do we do this whole section? Because sometimes trying to interface a newer shingle on a sloped roof with an older system becomes increasingly difficult, and the amount of old material that has to be removed in order to achieve a decent tie-in location may become a vast amount of material. So you end up redoing the whole roof system. So going back to what Albert said about the safety issue, I couldn't even send my guys out while that wind event was happening. There was no way anybody can put a ladder up and go up on a roof safely. I'm sure a lot of roofing contractors were experiencing the same thing. So there's a definite lag in response time. So it's all that much more important that people are proactive in how they're maintaining their buildings, on all aspects of their buildings, to make sure that it's prepared for a wind event like this. I mean, there's only so much preparation you can do, but as long as you've done what you can do, then you can feel comfortable and wait it out until that event is over, and then call in somebody to just make sure everything's cool after the fact.
Well, and some of the emergency planning in advance also deals with the surroundings of your buildings. Making sure that your trees are properly maintained, making sure your trees are properly pruned.
That goes in every one of our reports, pretty much.
Right. It's an ongoing problem that buildings have, not allowing debris to accumulate on buildings. Distance of trees away from surface. One of the reports and one of the damages that we've been helping Estrada with that's been kind of interesting is trees that became quite large but are on parking garages. They're actually planted on a parking garage, right? And of course, one of the trees came over. It's being removed. There was luckily no damage to the building, but in doing it, they've discovered quite a lot of damage to the parking membrane now. And of course, these trees that are moving on the parking membranes are causing a certain amount of wear and tear on the waterproof system. So they have damage in other areas, which now managed to get into the parking garage, get into another problem which had to do with the fact that there was no power, so no sump pumps. So they had concerns about flooding in the parking garage. So, it was a series of compounded problems, but they're just another type of roofing system, really, is all they are.
Oh, yeah.
But now they have landscaping on top of them to boot.
Yeah, well, it's just like a green roof where they go and plant all kinds of plants up on a green roof system on top of a building to make it look pretty and environmental and everything. But a lot of those plants in the beginning of a green roof's life may be designed for that roof system. But birds will deposit seeds from other types of plants on those roof systems, and now there's a growing medium. So you may end up with other plants that are more invasive and have stronger roots that'll actually go right into the roof system. And another point I was going to make about the trimming of trees that are close to buildings is roof rats and raccoons.
Right.
There's lots of cases where raccoons have gone up on an older cedar roof because it's easy to access because there's a tree branch hanging over, and then they'll rip that roof right apart, trying to get inside and trying to make a nest for themselves. So it's very important just from that aspect to make sure that there's a certain distance between the limbs of a tree and your building to keep those animals from bridging the gap.
Pretty interesting when you think of the interaction of everything between the landscape, building design, planning, and everything that follows. You're listening to CIL 650 Talk About Strata, and we'll be back right after these moments.
This is Experts on Call on CIL 650.